today is on employee recruiting and retention. We also have Rhonda Stevens on the phone or on the webinar here as a panelist. She is with BBSI. I'm going to go ahead and skip over to that slide. She's with BBSI and just a business partner of Biggs, an HR consultant for them. If you're not familiar with them, a really great organization to work with. But she does kind of the in-person and ready-to-go type HR consulting. So Ron is going to take over here in just a second. I just want to mention, if you do have any questions along the way, please use the little chat log. It's going to be minimized most likely. You might have clicked on that little red arrow that turned everything to the right, so you can get the information out of the way, or at least be able to see the full screen. Use that chat log. We'll try to answer questions if we can along the way. If not, we'll try to answer them at the end. And if that time we still not able to go ahead and answer them then we'll follow up via email to everybody. Slides will be available. We're also recording this webinar, so you'll be able to take a look or re-listen to the things that we're talking about through YouTube. So Rhonda, go ahead.
Okay, thanks Tyson, and thanks everybody for joining us. Hopefully you can hear me. If you have any trouble hearing me, just use the chat feature, and Tyson is running the webinar, so I'm not sure if I'll see things that are typed in or not, but Tyson will, so just speak up if there are any audio issues. Okay, so let's get started. People are not your most important asset, the right people are. And we've all heard many times that people are your most important asset, but I think that if you read any articles or business books, and James Collins was the one who coined that phrase, and he wrote the iconic book Good to Great. They all say that really it's the right people, not just people, that are your most important assets. So for the next half hour or so, we're going to focus on the importance of finding and keeping the right people, and we'll talk about some foundational practices in recruiting and retention efforts to increase your success rate. So according to Harvard Business Review and their research, 80% of employee turnover is a result of bad hiring decisions. Okay, next slide. So how bad are bad hiring decisions? A study by the National Business Research Institute revealed that 66% of employers said they had experienced negative effects of bad hires in 2012. So when you look at what those employers reported as far as how that translated into their work, there are some pretty high impact problems that really can reach the level of organizational performance. Everything from work quality issues to problems with coworkers, bad attitude, bad attendance, customer complaints, and missed deadlines. Okay. So on the next slide, this is from the same research. Of those employers, 43% attributed their bad hiring decisions to rushing through the recruiting process, basically. And then the next highest percentage was that they hired somebody that was unqualified for the position. So that clearly indicates that they didn't follow a good recruiting process. And I've learned this time and time again, and I'm sure many of you have as well, it simply does not pay to rush the process in order to get basically a warm body in the door, because if that's what you're looking for and you bring in, and that's about all you get. Okay? So what about employee turnover? The cost to replace an employee at $8 an hour, and this was a study that was done by several different groups, which are listed at the bottom of the graph. And so they looked at what it costs to replace an $8 an hour employee, which annually translates into $16,640. And so if you look at the graph, the range from the lowest, which is the Coca-Cola study, to the highest, which was the Cornell study, is 30% to 70% of that employee's annual compensation. And anecdotally, there's a lot of, if you Google this, there are a lot of different percentages that are represented out there as far as, what's the average, or what's, in general, what does it cost to replace a turned over employee. And you're going to get a lot of different percentages, but one of the constants is that percentage gets higher, that percentage of annual comp gets higher as the salary gets higher. So what happens to the bad hires? They eventually turn over, and you're basically back to the drawing board, and then you're going to incur all these costs. So on the next slide, when we're looking at the total cost, it's important to look at the less tangible and harder to see and measure factors, which would be decreased productivity, possible loss of clients due to maybe production delays, team disruption, and then also, in addition to the costs that are pretty obvious, look at the time spent by others in the organization in interviewing, retraining, and all the other things that go along with bringing in a new person. Next slide. Okay, so let's get into, first of all, we're going to go over 7 recruiting wins, and I used wins because there's all kinds of things out there where you can look at the 7 sins, so I thought we'd take the positive spin and look at the wins in recruiting. So look for the who, not the what. And the quote there from Peter Drucker, who's a well-known management guru, one cannot hire a hand, the whole man always comes with it. Because you're hiring a whole person and not just their skills, you want to create a really good complete profile of the person that you want to hire before you start even looking at resumes or even posting the position really. So what that includes is, obviously look at the qualifications, but also consider what personal characteristics do we need for a good cultural fit. What kind of person works well in this organization and what kind of person do we need in this particular job? Qualifications are for culling and not selecting. I think we all have been in this trap from time to time. I've probably looked at tens of thousands of resumes over my years in HR, and we tend to look at resumes like they're people. And really, it's much more expedient and actually a much better practice to use the qualifications really as just something that disqualifies the resumes that that don't qualify, and kind of leave it at that, because people really tend to personify resumes, and typically the resume is not very representative of the person. I mean, a lot of times somebody else is writing it. They're definitely inflated. So so be careful about kind of falling in love with a resume, basically. One thing to remember is that in general, character plus potential will quickly outpace skills. Now, that's not to say that you may not need very specific skills, in the person that you're hiring. But, if you, in the interviewing process, if you have somebody, all things being equal with skills, you're really going to want to focus on that character and that potential factor. And if it is a lower, more entry-level position, then you may decide that you can train the skills, but you're going to, you're really going to hire the person. And don't discount your gut. A lot of times, people kind of ignore red flags, or they just don't want to trust their gut feeling because they can't really describe why they think it's the right person, but a lot of times your gut's telling you the truth. Okay, so recruiting win 2, mind the process. Now this goes back to one of the slides early on where the employers that had experienced bad hires attributed that to rushing through the process because they needed to find somebody quickly. And so, this is just something that is so important, and it's so easy to, kind of fall in the trap of I need somebody quick, and I really don't have time to recruit, because it never comes at a good time. You lose employees, and you think I just need to get somebody in here, and so it's really easy to be tempted to skip steps in the process that are critical. So as far as some good practices for the recruiting process, you want to review resumes and respond quickly. Depending on what market you're in, at the time, it can be a pretty fierce competition for talent. So, and talent being, even just good potential young entry-level workers, they're applying for other jobs, and you want to keep that in mind. Keep up the momentum. Don't let your people in your organization that you're wanting to interview, your candidates, don't let them bog down the process. It's better to, have fewer interviewers, or, to maybe even fewer interviews. I wouldn't have less than 3, but definitely don't let that be something that bogs down the process. Prolonged waiting times generally equals lost candidates. Dedicate yourself to the mission. And this is probably the most critical thing that I can say here as far as minding the process, because again, it's really, really easy to kind of think of recruiting as this necessary evil that you have to do. But if you give it your highest energy and efforts, try to clear your schedule as much as possible and focus on the importance of bringing a person into the organization, it'll pay off. Recruiting win 3, inform and sell. So when you are talking to candidates, when you're interviewing, tell the company story. And we're going to talk in a few slides later about sharing the vision as far as retaining people. Start that right up front. Make them really identify with the company and really be excited about joining the company and not just getting the job that they're after. Give candidates as accurate a picture of the job as possible. Either just describe it in very accurate detail or do a realistic job preview. Those, if you don't know what that is, look that up on Google and you'll get a lot of great tips about, some companies, larger companies, high-tech companies are doing videos. You can do brochures, but just something that really gives an accurate picture of the job that the person's applying for. Communicate the values and culture through your interaction. If your company is formal, then you don't want to, be using, very loose kind of street language. If your company, on the other hand, is informal, you don't want to sound too buttoned up and stiff. So definitely let the culture show through your interaction. Give your own stories and examples as well. Recruiting win 4, source creatively. So a lot of times our best candidates, in my experience, have come from, not from our ads, and we always post ads, we use the websites, but post everywhere. Post on your personal Facebook account. Post, on your personal LinkedIn, and, everything that gets the word out to your friends, your family, your connections that you're recruiting for this job, because sometimes those are the best sources. Typically, when you get a referral from somebody they're not going to stick their neck out unless they know that it's a good, that this will be a good hire for you. So take those very seriously and get the word out. Approach industry organizations. So if you're in an industry that has a professional association or organization, spread the word there as well. Calling strangers and enemies. What I mean by that is, yes, use college job boards, but also if there's a program at a college that is teaching the skills for the person that you want, call college instructors. They're a great source for tapping into candidates that may not even be looking at the job boards. And then industry competitors and talent competitors, that means call your competition. If you have any connections, even if you have a connection with somebody that you would like to hire, call them. I mean, to be honest, cherry picking is it's a pretty standard practice, and it's not generally seen as, anything that's unfair or unethical in most cases. There are cases where it can look that way. If you've left an organization and then you go to a new one and try to take everybody with you, that's kind of not usually appreciated. But I mean, this is what recruiters do, and then down to referral incentives where I talk about accessing passive candidates. You can do that both by calling those connections that you have, at your competitors, and also your employees have connections at the competitors usually. So, incent them to refer people. There's kind of an old, I think, myth that friendships in workplace are not a good thing, and I think that's definitely an outdated myth if it was ever even true. And in fact, Gallup has a pretty famous State of the American Workplace study that they do, which is referred to as Q12, where that is one of the 12 factors of employee engagement. So, hiring people's friends is usually not a bad thing. Okay, recruiting win 5. Use due diligence. Have a tight interview process. You want to have consistent questions, at least, as far as the first, maybe the second interview. You don't want to go off the cuff and let it just be organic. You can have those organic conversations in later interviews, and I think you should. But definitely, when you're screening, the screening questions should be the same for every candidate. Use proven interviewing techniques. Behavioral interviewing is one of the most popular ones, and that's probably the best one. And make sure that if you can, that you have the same people interviewing each candidate so that they can have the full picture as far as, selection. They've seen everybody. Keep things moving. And we talked about this in one of the earlier slides. When you get to your finalists, you should be having 3 to 4 interviews with those people. That should only take about 2 to 3 weeks from very first interview to being ready to make an offer. Now, sometimes that is impossible because, sometimes you get candidates who applied for the position, you really want to interview them, but maybe they're out of town. Or maybe you do have a key interviewer who literally cannot clear their schedule for a week or 2. So those things come up, but generally try to really, get through that process in 2 to 3 weeks to keep it fresh as far as being able to compare candidates, but also so you don't lose people. Longer selection periods, again, you'll lose candidates. If you have a really short selection period, like if you have a first interview on a Monday and you're making an offer by Thursday, that's probably going to look a little desperate, and it's probably going to mean you didn't do a very good job with your process. Reference checks. People hate doing these. I get that. I don't like doing them either, but you can't treat them as a cursory step because they really can be quite valuable. A lot of times in my experience, people who I had doing reference checks would say, well, I could only get a hold of one of the people. The other people just wouldn't return my calls. So one of the things that I did to try to, get better success with that was to email every single one of the references listed immediately and just, try to get on their schedule. And I think a lot of times people are more willing to, have a scheduled time to talk to you than either answering their phone or returning your call. Describe the job expectations and ask for examples. So when you're talking to, a former employer, make sure that they understand the job that this person would be doing. And when you're talking about the performance in their former job, ask for examples of how their work would apply to the job that you've described. Recruiting 1-6. Hire right, not perfect. Again, you're looking for the right person. What I would suggest is that you revisit that profile that we talked about often because it's easy to forget the who and revert to the what. So you start, going back to qualifications only. So read that thing every day, whatever it takes, to remember who you're looking for because you really need the right person, not just a person or even a qualified person. Keep the full package in mind. Again, you obviously need the skills and the qualifications, but you want a good cultural fit. That is so very important that just, don't settle for kind of a partial package if you can avoid it. Another thing you might want to do is profile your A players. So, look at your best employees, what type of personality they have, what are their strengths and weaknesses. And don't necessarily try to clone them. And in fact, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to round out your team with a different personality type. But you can definitely, draw some areas that you want to be consistent across your team, and then some differences, so you get some strengths diversity in there. Avoid settling. Again, skills without good fit is a lose. It's not a win. Don't ignore red flags. And be willing to start over, and that's really hard because if you have somebody who you think is probably okay, but you lost your really good candidate because they took another job, you really should just start over because you'll probably regret hiring the person that you think may not be the right person. And then recruiting 1-7. Don't stop recruiting. This should be something that, if you're a hiring manager or somebody in HR, you should continually be building your pipeline. And that's not a full-time job. That's just, stay connected with candidates that you didn't choose but you thought were a good cultural fit, but for whatever reason, maybe they just weren't, qualified for the specific job. Keep in touch with them. Network within your industry organizations. Have a strong social media presence. That helps your employment brand, even if it's your personal LinkedIn page, for example, and not a company LinkedIn page. If you are putting yourself out there as connected to this company, then you have an opportunity to reflect really well for the company and help the company brand. Create brand ambassadors. If you can incent your employees to go out there and post reviews of you as an employer on Glassdoor, and there are some other recruiting websites that are starting to have that same feature. And that may sound a little bit scary, but keep in mind that if you're doing the right things, then they should be saying the right things. So don't be afraid of that. Track your recruiting data. So you want to, when you're finished, once you've made a hire, you want to look at your where you got that person from, essentially, so that you always have a running account of which websites are working well, or are you getting most of your best people in other ways, from employee referrals or referrals of friends or social media. Definitely track that, and then also track the reasons for any candidates that you lost, and then any declined offers, because those can clue you into issues with the process. Keep strategies fresh. Monitor trends. I'm sure you get a million emails in your inbox, each month talking about what's going on out there in the world of recruiting. Keep an eye on those. Try new resources. If there's a new website that you've heard about from maybe candidates that they really liked, look at it, price it, maybe try it for your next position. And then a really good thing to do is every time you have a new hire, survey them on their job search experience. And I don't think this is something that employers think of, or they may think it's kind of a weird question to ask, but I actually think it probably reflects well on you, from the employee standpoint, that you want to know if there was another company out there that they thought had a better process than you, from their standpoint. So learn from them. All right, so we're going to move to retention. Retention star ingredient 1, meaning. So this is a huge topic right now in terms of employee engagement. Making sure that every single person understands the organizational mission and purpose. And it's really easy to assume that they do, but if you and if leadership are not communicating that and communicating it really clearly and believably, then they're not connected in that way, and that will have a negative impact on their experience there and how engaged they are. Make sure that your employees understand basically the organizational why. Why are we here? What are we trying to do? And tie that into a shared purpose with them and their job, which is job alignment. So show the completed puzzle, and what I mean by that is, if you can go through an exercise that aligns all the different units or departments or however you're structured, and tie that to the organizational overall mission or strategy, and then take each position and show how it flows up into accomplishing that. That is a huge thing for people to see, because they may know what their job is and what their duties are, but if they see how they're contributing to the organization as a whole, then it's pretty impactful. And then again, highlight the interdependencies, because it's also easy for employees to get kind of siloed into their unit or their department or their team. They're not going to be as engaged as they would be if they understood and really embraced that they're part of a bunch of different, depending on how big you are, units, departments that all are interdependent that contribute to the overall mission of the organization. And then the job purpose, of course, think of it in terms of explaining why the company needs them to come to work every day. I mean, that seems like a silly thing, but if they really can latch on to that, then they're going to want to come to work every day, or they're going to feel at least like it's what they're doing really matters. It means something. And then again, what they do to contribute to the mission. Retention star ingredient number 3, management. So your managers and supervisors, this would be training for them, or you if that's you. Always have clear and effective goals. Now that, we hear that over and over, and I think we hear it so much that it just kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But you have to be pretty intentional if you want to have goals that are effective. So they have to be formal and specific. They have to have milestones and timelines, and people have to be held accountable to those. And milestones should be celebrated. You know, goals should not be something that people dread. It should be something that gives them clear direction, you know, clear milestones for, okay, reach that one, yay. Keep going because my timeline is this. So it's got to be pretty intentional and structured for it to be effective. Manage whole humans. You know, as much as we like to think that everybody should leave their personal life at home, it's not realistic. It doesn't really happen. Some people are better at hiding, you know, that they have a personal life than others, but you know, I don't even think that's very healthy. I mean, the fact of the matter is we are whole humans, and to the extent that managers and supervisors can truly understand their employees, which takes, you know, getting to know them, that goes a long way in really making that a good relationship. You know, acknowledge emotion. People, you know, people are different as far as what their needs are to be acknowledged, but when somebody's showing emotion, the best thing you can do, instead of, you know, kind of telling them to calm down, is acknowledge it. And a lot of times that is the only thing that they need, or the biggest thing that they need. Develop your own empathy. You know, and this is something that I think that we all try to do, at least in leadership positions, and we all need to continually develop, is trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Okay, so they, you know, they did something maybe that made you mad, or they did something that, you know, just wasn't the best thing. You know, try to put yourself in their shoes for a minute and see maybe what contributed to that, because then maybe you can help them not to make that mistake again, or just they're going to, it's going to have a really good impact on them if they sense that you do understand, or at least can see from their perspective. Manage performance. So performance management, you know, it needs to be real time all the time. I mean, you know, there should be at least annual, if not semi-annual, formal reviews, but managers really need to be taught and to be held to and get in the habit of, this is an everyday job. You know, I have to give feedback all the time, you know, at the time that things are happening. That is so much more effective than an annual review where you're bringing up things that people forgot about, or, you know, things that should have been brought up at the time, because that can be pretty demoralizing. Okay, retention star ingredient 2 is leadership. So leadership, in contrast to management, leaders need to inspire. You know, and part of that is sharing the vision, which we talked about earlier, and really reaching the heart of people. And, you know, that just means that, you know, the messages, the communication about the organization and maybe about what's going on in the organization, if it can be done in a way where people have an emotion about it, then that's a good thing. I mean, because that's what really makes things stick. And communication itself, you know, clarity, people hate ambiguity. So the more clarity that leaders can give to people in the organization, the more relaxed they're going to be about what they're doing. And honesty and transparency, and those are, to me, two different things. I mean, you have to, as a leader, always be honest. You can't lie. You know, you have to tell the truth. But even beyond that, you can still be honest, but non-transparent. I mean, to the extent that it's okay for the organization, I say err on the side of just telling everything. Now, there are things that you can't tell. There are things that are protected by privacy rules, or, you know, that just aren't good to share with employees. But always, you know, question yourself when you're thinking about, oh, that probably isn't something we should share. Question yourself as to why, because a lot of times there really isn't a good reason, and I think that anything that you can share goes a long way to helping employees to trust leadership. And then investing in people. You know, do treat them like the most important asset, because I think a lot of times, you know, we say that they are, and we may even know that they are, but do we treat them in a way that reflects that? You know, and investing in people means investment of time and investment of money and things like development and just perks, you know, things that make it nice to be at work. Retention star ingredient 4 is culture. One of the most important things, I think, in a culture is that everybody is held accountable, everyone equally. There's a great quote by Gruner and Whitaker, who, interestingly enough, are writers for in the academic world. And they say the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. And I think that is 100% spot on. If your leaders are tolerating bad behavior by people who, maybe it's your best salespeople or your rainmakers or people that you think you can't live without, if that's tolerated, that's your culture, and it's not a good one. Be intentionally inclusive, and I say intentionally because I think we all like to think we're inclusive, but it's something that we really need to look at and make sure that we're taking very deliberate steps to make sure that everybody feels like they're included, at least in some group within the organization. Excuse me. Some of the strategies that I thought would be helpful, integration strategy, include integration in your onboarding. And I've had programs where we have done pretty significant amounts of integration, everything from making sure that the family is invited to events and sending gifts to the family, to just maybe making sure that the new person for the first year really is attending optional group meetings, or if there are informal things that people can attend, making sure that they're really getting plugged into those. And then also if you do employee development, use team building activities that are inclusive, create structured opportunities for mixing, and then mentoring, and that can be a formal mentoring program or it can be informal, but having somebody for the new person to trust and to go to with questions that they're afraid to ask, or even just to kind of talk about problems that they may be having. It's really, really valuable for somebody to have that person, but I will caution you to say don't just assign mentors willy-nilly, because some people are good at it and some people are not. And the people who are not good at it, best case scenario is it's not effective, but worst case scenario is it could be actually bad for the person. And then I like to inspire a what's next culture, because one of the things that I learned in my position before coming to BBSI was people hate change. And that was okay for a long time in the organization that I was in. But, as we know in this day and age, since about 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there, things are, companies have to make constant change in order to stay relevant and in order to stay competitive. It is a change world. So, if you can kind of have a what's next expectation, and this is a journey, not a destination, we're never there, then I think people become much more tolerant to change and much more open to a continuous improvement environment. Retention star ingredient 5. This is progress. People need to have a sense of progress. So that can look like a few different things. One is development. Make sure that you are developing your management leadership. That's obviously very, very important, but make sure you're also doing it with the staff. And not only job skill development, which is obviously important, but personal development. That actually, I think, can be higher impact on an overall organization's culture and performance than than all the time job skill training. And by personal development, I mean things like, emotional intelligence, the softer skills that, a lot of people seem to discredit, but I think that, and if they're in a good program, they end up buying into it, if it's taught right, and it can be hugely impactful. And then career progression, of course, people want career progression. Now that can be hard in positions that are really, so if you have, like, for example, an administrative position in an organization that's like an engineering organization, you're probably not going to get your admin people progressing into engineering positions. But with that, there's always progression into management positions for the right people, but you can also build kind of a progression within positions. So if you have an admin position, you look at, okay, what what all, is it just that position, or are there other kind of higher level admin positions that they can career path into? Or if not, then give their admin position some stepping stones, and that actually will keep them working towards something and not getting stale and feeling like they know what the next thing is that they're working for. That is a huge thing as far as keeping people in an organization, is people feeling like they have something that they're working for within that organization to step up into. And then pay progression, of course. Pay progression is the closest thing that I put in here as far as retention to compensation, because I don't think that compensation in and of itself is hugely, I don't think it's very closely correlated with good retention, but pay progression is. So, it's not that you have to give giant raises, but make sure that you have a compensation philosophy and that it's shared. Because if people understand what it is and what the expectations are in order to make more money or to earn bonuses, then that will give them much more of a sense of ease and contentment as far as, again, just like the career progression, knowing what's next. And that is the end of the slides. So I'm not sure what time it is. Tyson, do we have time for questions?
Yeah, let's do just probably 2, and then we'll end there, I think, unless there's some others that come along. So one of the things that just came across was the pay progression. So just, I guess, recommendations for people that are getting to the top end of a wage scale, and what do you recommend from that perspective?
So I'm happy to hear that you have a wage scale, because that is a very important part of a compensation system. So when that happens, a lot of employers, and it depends on your budget, will continue to bonus people basically dollar for dollar what they would have gotten. So let's say that you have a 3% raise budget, and so people who are not at the top are getting 3% raises. Somebody's at the top, so you take 3%, what they would get 3% in a year, and bonus them dollar for dollar. Now that's probably the high end of things, but you can always bonus them at a percent, or some sort of something to make them know that they're not just going to continue to earn X amount of dollars every year for the rest of their life if they stay there. So definitely.
So what you're saying is someone's getting to the top end of a scale. Obviously you communicated that they know that they're on the top end. You could still look at giving them like a lump sum that would be the equal. Yes. It's not necessarily raising their wages, and then another.
Absolutely, yeah. And the difference there, so you may be thinking, well, then why is there a top of scale? Because we're still at that money. You are, but it's not in fixed expenses. So, you can, when it's discretionary, or, when it's that type of pay, then variable pay is what it's called, then you kind of have the year-to-year discretion to attach whatever budget you can afford to it, or no budget if you can't afford it. But so it's not going into like a fixed expense in your financials. It's just something that you can do if you can afford it. So, but I would caution you to try to make it clear, early on each year, however you do your raises, whether there is going to be a budget for those variable payments or not. But it just gives you more flexibility from a budget standpoint.
Yeah, interesting. Another one that came up, and this was from a little while ago, they're asking what personality tests, when you're going through the interview process, that you would recommend.
The one that, so there are a bunch of them out there, and I've done myself 4 or 5 of them. Interestingly, I just, about 2 weeks ago, did one called the Berkman. I don't know how much it costs, because it was one that was purchased by an organization that I'm affiliated with, and but it was the most comprehensive test that I've seen as far as revealing not only strengths, but then based on those strengths and then other personality elements that come out in the report, what this person really needs basically out of a boss and out of a team, and then if those needs aren't being met, how those behaviors how it may impact their behaviors. So again, it's really comprehensive. It may not be, at least the level that I did, may not be practical unless it's a key hire that maybe you're doing this test on 2 or 3 of the finalists, but I think that there are scaled down versions of the Berkman, but that was definitely my favorite out of, I've done Berkman, I've done DISC, Myers-Briggs, and PrEP, and I like the Berkman the best.
Okay. That's good information. I think we're going to hold off there unless there's anything else you want to add, Rhonda, but I do want to thank you for the time and everyone else's time, obviously, for attending the session today. We're going to share the slides with everybody. We're also going to share a link for the web video, or recording of the web video. If you do have any questions that come up, feel free to reach out to Rhonda or myself, and we'll do our best to be able to answer your questions along the way. And really do appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for attending.